It's September 28th. Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Cheparenko. Now we will be talking about the situation in Kherson region. Joining us online is Yuriy Sobolevskyi, first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council. Mr. Yuriy, good afternoon. Good afternoon. President Zelensky mentioned recently that Kherson region is being incessantly and very intensely shelled by the enemy. The intensity of shellings keeps growing. So what is the situation for the time being? What is the aftermath of the most recent strikes? Well, unfortunately, as you may see, the security situation is quite complicated. Within the last, maybe not even days, but weeks, the intensity of the shellings keeps growing. The enemy uses artillery systems, MLRS mortars. They drop the explosives from the drones, and they continue using more and more guided aviation bombs, FAB 500. The number of cases when the enemy uses this type of ammunition keeps growing, and usually they were not, and recently or previously they were not using that type of ammunition in Kherson. They were not working using this ammunition in the district of Ostrov, the island. Now they use it against the district of Bereslav, the city of Bereslav, and other villages and towns in the adjacent areas. Unfortunately, we keep losing people due to the mine threat. People end up into mine traps. They step over the enemy's landmines that enemy retained in our territory. People get injured and unfortunately even die. Just yesterday we lost a person who was working in the field and they got blown up by one of the residual explosive devices. So what is the situation with evacuation from the left bank? There is yet another wave of mandatory evacuation. So who is being evacuated from which parts? Well, there is a list of 31, I think, settlements where the Security Council decided to use such a measure as a mandatory evacuation. Well, not forced evacuation, but mandatory evacuation. I want to emphasize it. For the families that have children, well, we treat the decision of people to stay where they live with respect, but it would be more correct in our opinion to take the decision to leave. But when we're talking about the lives of children, you know, the lives of people are of biggest value to us, and children are a whole different thing. So I hope everybody will take this decision with responsibility. They will support it and they will temporarily leave those areas that are on the list. They are all located along the banks of Dnipro, and the risks of staying there are still very high, because we understand that within some period the enemy will still have opportunity to maintain the intensity of shellings that exists for the time being. And what I want to add is that our defense forces fulfill a wonderful job to reduce the number of these shellings, and counter-battery fight is in progress. The security and defense forces of Ukraine keep very extensive territory under their fire control, but the enemy keeps launching the guided aviation bombs from the safe distance, which are guided in the directions of our settlements. Moreover, the enemy uses our people who stay in the East Bank as the live shield. So when they launch the MLRS from the areas near the residential areas, we cannot respond to this fire because the risk is very high to have our people injured, those whom the enemy uses as the live shield. And I support the address of the military governor of the region to the people who live in the areas close to the riverbank to leave those areas. Mr. Yuriy, what is the situation with the critical infrastructure and preparation to the winter season? Well, local military administrations are currently in charge of this process. The process is guided by the regional administration. According to the information that I have, there are measures taken aimed to make sure that we pass this season comfortably. Unfortunately, there are communities or districts of the communities where such work is very complicated. For example, talking about Kherson in the district of Ostrev, such works are almost impossible. In Antonivka, we cannot resume the operations of the critical infrastructure 100%, but we also prepare the alternative measures to make sure that people have heat supply, and we have advice for the people to leave certain areas, certain settlements, because the security situation is something that does not allow us to rebuild our critical infrastructure. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Do you have any questions to Mr. Yuriy? Good afternoon, Valentina Rikal, Ukrinform. Mr. Yuriy, do we know how many schools did the occupiers open in the east bank of Kherson region, and who works there? Well, thank you for your question. That's a very important story, so to say. According to the information that we have, there are a little bit more than 100 educational institutions working in those areas. The majority of them are understaffed. They don't have enough teachers to organize the process properly. They were trying to organize so-called educational assaults, so to say, where they were trying to bring teachers from Buryatia, but they don't have normal contact, first of all, with the local teachers, at least those who agreed to participate in that process. And the situation is very complicated with our students because they constantly make such a, so to say, protest performances against the educational program. We know the cases when children refused to stand up when they were forced to listen to the anthem of Russian Federation. It was a grandiose scandal in that community. The occupiers started calling the parents, having interviews and some educational conversations with them. They said if the situation repeats, the parents would be deprived of their parent rights, the children will be deported to foster homes in the Russian Federation. So basically they resorted to intimidation, something that the only thing that they can do. And now what the occupational authority does is the propaganda mostly. They continue having meetings with the representatives of Russian army who tell them about some heroic deeds of Russian army. They bring children to the training fields. They created this youth army unit, the propaganda unit, semi-militarized formation, and they take other similar measures. So they try to establish new social connections with the children, and that way through their peers in Russian Federation. So they have an extensive program of cultural exchange when children are being brought to Russian Federation under the premises of recreation or other programs, so that they spend most time possible in Russian Federation and communicate with the children in Russian Federation. And what is the information about the resistance movement in Kherson region? Well, look, we will be telling you a lot about the resistance movement after the victory. It's very intense, it's powerful. The denizens of Kherson region are unbreakable, and we do appreciate every effort of those who provide us with information on the humanitarian conditions and the information which is important to the military, information about the local collaborationists. So we know a lot about you. We hand over all the information about you to the security service of Ukraine promptly. So everybody who committed treason will be brought to liability, no matter what was your status before the war, no matter any merits. The fate of the traitor is either jail or grave. Mr. Yuriy, thank you very much for informing us on the situation in Kherson region. I'm reminding you, joining us was Yuriy Sobolevskyi, first deputy head of Kherson Regional Council. Our team is putting together the schedule for tomorrow. Stay tuned. See you so shortly.